The first thing Elia's Rourke tasted was copper. Not the clean copper of a coin pressed to the tongue. This was hot, alive, threaded with something ancient and cold. It slid down his throat like a promise and a threat, and for one staggering heartbeat he couldn't tell if he was swallowing salvation or surrender. The second thing he tasted was starlight. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. The corridor around him, once a sterile artery of white panels and humming vents, had collapsed into a jagged ribcage of wreckage. Emergency lights strobed in panicked crimson. Somewhere far above, a ship's hull screamed as it cooled, metal contracting like a wounded animal trying not to die. Elias tried to breathe. His lungs answered with a wet rattle. There had been an explosion, a breach. A sudden gravity hiccup that threw him into a wall hard enough to break bone. He remembered sparks like angry insects, the taste of ozone, the brutal silence after the alarm cut off mid-wail. He remembered the last order he'd heard through the comms: hold that junction. Civilians behind you, don't let them through. And then the black. Now the black was back, waiting at the edge of his vision like a patient predator. Elias' hand twitched, fingers scraping broken plating. His gauntlet was cracked. The skin beneath was split, blood darkening into tacky clots. His body felt wrong, heavy, numb, distant. He tried to push himself up and discovered he couldn't feel his right leg at all. A shadow moved beside him. He forced his eyes to focus. She was not human. She wasn't even mostly human the way some species were, in that comforting 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes forward symmetry the galaxy loved to categorize as civilized. She was slender and too still, her posture poised like an arrow waiting for release. Her skin, if it was skin, caught the emergency light and drank it rather than reflecting it, a velvety midnight that seemed to swallow color. Her eyes were pale, almost silver, and they tracked him with a calm so unsettling it felt like mockery. A hemivore, that was the polite coalition term. Back on Earth, the tabloids called them vampires and sold shaky videos of pale figures stepping through darkness like it belonged to them. The coalition's official dossiers were clinical, nocturne adapted. Hemoglobin-dependent, highly intelligent, bioelectric sensory acuity, cultural taboo blood sharing, and then in bold warning text that every human recruit memorized: do not engage in hemal exchange, contamination risk unknown. Elias tried to speak. His throat produced a broken wheeze. The hemivore crouched. Her movement was so smooth it didn't feel like muscle and bone doing work. It felt like gravity politely rearranging itself around her. She tilted her head, studying him. "You are dying," she said, voice low and precise. Her accent clipped the words as if each syllable had sharp edges. "Yeah," Elias managed. "I noticed." A flicker of something crossed her face: amusement, irritation, grief. It was gone before his pain-addled brain could name it. "You held the junction," she said. "Was that the test?" He coughed, and the cough turned into a spasm that painted the inside of his visor with red mist. "Because I'm not feeling very graded." "You held," she repeated, firmer. "Long enough." Elias tried to laugh. It came out as a wet rasp. "Good, great, tell the universe I got an A." The hemovore's gaze dipped to his shattered leg, the pooling blood, the tremor in his hands. Her nostrils flared, so subtle he wouldn't have noticed if he weren't watching for it. "You smell of iron," she said. "That's one way to put it." She leaned closer. The air around her carried a faint chill, like the underside of a stone. Elias Rourke, his stomach clenched. "How do you know my name?" "I read your tag." She reached toward his chest, fingers hovering above his cracked insignia plate where the embedded ID beacon flickered weakly. She didn't touch him, not quite, as if contact mattered. Elias swallowed and pain spiked through his ribs. "Who are you?" A pause, like she was deciding whether names were worth giving to dying things. "Sari," she said at last. "Of House Vey, Hunter Archivist." Elias blinked. "Hunter Archivist." "I hunt what must be ended," she said, and her eyes hardened. "I remember what should not be forgotten." The ship groaned. Somewhere, something detached and slammed into bulkheads with a distant boom. The corridor trembled as if the station itself was trying to shake off its own death. Elias' visor HUD sputtered. His suit diagnostics were a list of red warnings, each one more final than the last: hemorrhage, trauma, organ failure, low oxygen. He'd seen his share of death, most of it quick, some of it cruel, none of it dignified. He didn't want to die. Not in this broken hallway with sirens that had run out of breath. Sari's hands moved to her own wrist. Elias' eyes widened. "Wait," she drew a thin, curved blade from a sheath hidden along her forearm. The metal was dark and matte, drinking the emergency light like her skin did. She pressed it to her wrist and sliced, clean and deliberate, blood-welled. It wasn't red. It shimmered deep, iridescent, as if the color couldn't decide whether it belonged to night or bruise or oil slick. It clung thickly to her skin before spilling, slow as honey. Elia's throat tightened. Coalition training flashed through his mind, hollow diagrams of hemivores with their predatory myths and their diplomatic treaties, the careful warnings about their biology, the way medics always treated hemivore blood like a biohazard even when alliances demanded smiles. Sari held her bleeding wrist near his visor. "You will drink," she said. Elias shook his head, or tried. It was more a tremor. "No. No, I'm not turning into me." Her tone sharpened. "You think my blood is a curse." "Look," Elias rasped, "I don't think you're a monster, I just Coalition says many things," Sari snapped. The comm cracked and in it he heard something raw. "Coalition says my people are tolerated. Coalition says we are managed risk. Coalition says we should be grateful." Her eyes burned bright, pale in the emergency light. "But you held the junction, you did not run. You did not bargain with your fear, you bled for strangers." Elias' vision blurred. The edges of Sari's face doubled. The darkness at the edge of his sight yawned wider. "Sari," he whispered, "don't." Her expression softened just slightly. "If you die, the ones behind you die later, not here, elsewhere, slower." He tried to lift his hand, to push her away, to grab her wrist, anything. His arm barely moved. Sari pressed her wrist to the crack in his visor. The seal had failed. The air hissed. Her blood touched his lips. It was cold, and then it was. It was everything, a rush of flavor and sensation that made his nerves light up like a city scene from orbit. The copper tang was there, but beneath it lay something like winter wind and dark fruit, like storms and old stone. It slid over his tongue and down his throat, and his body, his dying, failing human body, reacted like it had been waiting for this all along. Elias' lungs convulsed. His heart slammed against his ribs, fast and hard, then stuttered as if confused. He thought, "This is it. This is where I become someone else." Sari's voice reached him from far away. "Drink." Elias drank. He didn't know if it was fear or instinct or stubbornness, but he drank until his throat burned and his stomach twisted. He drank until the cold became heat and the heat became lightning. Then Sari pulled away and slapped her palm against his chest, right over his failing heart. A pulse of pain shot through him, not from her hand, from inside. His veins ignited. Elias arched off the floor with a strangled cry. His suit alarm screamed as his vital signs spiked, then dropped, then spiked again, erratic as a storm. Sari's face remained close, eyes unblinking, watching him like a scientist watching an experiment that might bite. "Breathe," she ordered. Elias tried. Air came finally in a harsh gulp that didn't rattle. His lungs drew it in and didn't immediately drown. He blinked hard, the emergency lights sharpened, each pulse of red outlining edges he hadn't noticed before, the microscopic dust in the air, the faint vibration of the bulkhead, the slow drip of his own blood in neat intervals like a metronome. His skin prickled with sensation. It felt as if his nerves were waking up one by one, furious about having been asleep. He gasped again and realized he could smell not just smoke and metal and burning insulation. He could smell people. There were humans behind him in the evacuation corridor, down 2 junctions and behind sealed doors, fierce sweat and antiseptic breath held tight. There were Coalition Marines further away, their armor warmed by exertion, their adrenaline sharp. There were aliens too, 3 different biochemistries, each distinct as a signature. And there were others, a faint scent at the edge of perception, like cold ash and dried blood, hemivores. Elias' eyes flew to Sari. She stepped back as if giving him space to decide whether to attack or thank her. "How?" he started, but his voice came out different, deeper, steadier, not quite his. He swallowed. The copper taste lingered, but now it carried an echo like music heard through a wall. "What did you do to me?" he demanded. Sari's gaze didn't waver. "I refuse to let you be wasted." Elias' hands clenched. His right leg, he could feel it now, not fully, it wasn't whole. But the numb void was gone, replaced by a deep ache that suggested something inside him was knitting itself together. He looked down. The shattered bone had shifted. The torn flesh was closing, slowly, impossibly, like time itself had decided to rewind. Elias stared, breath catching. "That's not." "It is," Sari said. "My people call it the Night's Gift." Elias' mind flashed to myths, vampires turning victims, curses, and immortality and hunger. He looked up sharply. "Am I going to need?" Sari's expression tightened. "Blood, yes." Elias froze. Sari lifted a hand before he could speak. "Not as you fear, not as a predator with no choice, not as a beast." She took a slow breath, and for the first time he saw strain in her composure. "Our blood carries more than sustenance. It carries instructions, patterns, a symphony of living code." Elias swallowed hard. "You mean like engineered?" Sari's lips pressed together. My people would say refined. We survived a world that tried to starve us of what we needed to live. We adapted until adaptation became art. Elias' pulse steadied. He could feel it now stronger than before, beating with an undercurrent that didn't belong to purely human physiology. His veins hummed faintly like a power line. He clenched his jaw. So what happens now? Sari's eyes softened just a fraction. Now you choose who you become. The ship groaned again, louder, and the corridor trembled violently. A panel tore loose overhead and crashed to the floor between them, showering sparks. Sari's head snapped toward the junction. Her posture changed instantly, hunter alert. They are coming, she said. Elias followed her gaze. His enhanced hearing caught it, the thud of armored boots, the rhythm wrong for Coalition Marines, the scrape of claws on metal, voices harsh, guttural, not Coalition standard. Raiders, the Karai, the species that had turned piracy into a polite word for slaughter. Elias pushed himself upright. His leg protested, then held. He stood wobbly at first, then steadier. His body felt lighter than it should, as if gravity had loosened its grip on him. His senses were so sharp the world almost hurt, but beneath the overload was clarity. His mind, fogged by pain a minute ago, was now a knife. He looked at his rifle where it had fallen. He grabbed it. Sari watched him with an unreadable expression. Your body is not finished changing. Then it's changing on the job, Elias said, voice hardening. He checked the rifle's charge. Low, he swore under his breath. Sari reached to her hip and tossed him a small canister. Drink. Elias caught it automatically. What is? Concentrate, Sari said. Not mine, synth. Elias didn't hesitate. The cap twisted off. The liquid inside was dark and thick. He swallowed. The effect was immediate. Heat rolled through his belly and out to his limbs like fuel reaching an engine. His muscles tightened ready. Sari's eyes flicked over him. You learn quickly. Human specialty, Elias muttered. The junction ahead erupted in sound, metal slicing, locks being forced. The Karai didn't knock, they tore. Elias braced behind a half-collapsed support beam. Sari melted into shadow beside him, moving so quietly his enhanced senses almost missed her. The door buckled inward. 3 Karai stormed through, tall, wide, plated in scavenged armor. Their eyes were black and flat, their mouths full of teeth that looked like tools. They carried jagged pulse blades and crude rifles built to spray rather than aim. They didn't see Elias at first. They smelled him, their heads jerked, nostrils flaring. One of them snarled, voice like gravel. Human, and Sari struck. She moved faster than Elias' human brain would have tracked before, but now he saw it, the precise angle of her wrist, the glide of her blade, the moment her body became a line and then a point. The Karai in front stumbled, clutching his throat as dark blood poured between his fingers. The other 2 roared and raised their rifles. Elias fired. His shots were controlled, measured, 2 bursts that hit center mass, then one that cracked a helmet. The Karai collapsed, armor sparking. The 3rd swung a pulse blade toward Elias' head. Elias ducked. He should have been too slow. He was. His body moved like it had already predicted the arc. He felt the blade pass over him, close enough to singe hair. He surged forward, slammed the rifle butt into the raider's knee, heard the joint crunch, and as the Karai fell, he drove his elbow into its throat with a force that made his arm vibrate. The raider gurgled and went still. Silence fell, broken only by distant alarms. Elias stared at his hands, breathing hard. His pulse was steady, too steady. He looked at Sari. She watched him as if watching a star go nova. You are adapting. Elias swallowed. Feels like my body got promoted. Sari's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Do not become arrogant. Elias exhaled sharply. I'm dying to avoid that. Her eyes sharpened. Careful, human. Humor is dangerous. It convinces you death is optional. Elias glanced down the corridor, senses stretching. More Karai, at least a dozen, and behind them the frightened humans in the evacuation corridor still trapped. We can't hold this, Elias said. Sari's gaze flicked. We do not need to hold forever. We need to hold long enough. Elias frowned. For what? Sari's eyes turned distant, calculating. For the station's core to vent. Elias' blood ran cold. That will kill everyone. It will kill the raiders, Sari corrected, and the ship will be written off, but the evacuation corridor is sealed. It will survive the vent if its field holds. Elias felt a rising anger. That's not a plan, that's a gamble. Sari stepped closer. This is war. Elias clenched his jaw. War doesn't mean we stop trying. Sari's pale eyes narrowed. You will argue ethics with me while they slaughter families. Elias stared at her, and in his sharpened senses he heard the fear behind the sealed doors, children crying silently, adults whispering prayers, a medic trying not to shake. He looked back to Sari. There's another way. Sari's brows lifted slightly. Speak. Elias closed his eyes for half a second and listened. He could feel the station now, not metaphorically, literally. Like a faint vibration in his bones, a hum that matched his heartbeat, the blood in his veins, Sari's blood carried bioelectric awareness. He could sense power conduits pulsing behind walls, heat signatures of systems, the shifting strain in structural supports. He opened his eyes, startled by his own certainty. We reroute power, he said, not vent the core, flood this corridor with UV spectrum emergency lights. Sari stared. UV burns my kind. Elias met her gaze. Exactly. Her expression went hard. You would turn this corridor into a weapon that kills me? Elias shook his head. It won't kill you if you're not in it. Get behind the sealed doors with the civilians. I'll trigger the lights, force the Karai to fall back, then Coalition Marines can retake the junction. Sari's eyes narrowed. And you? Elias lifted the rifle. I'll stand here, Sari's voice lowered. You are still dying, Elias Rourke. Your body is changing, but it is not invincible. Elias' mouth twisted. Never said it was. Sari stepped closer until he could feel the chill of her presence. Why? He blinked. Because that's what we do. Sari's gaze searched his face as if she expected a lie. Elias continued, quieter, because every species out here thinks humans are reckless animals, because the Coalition treats your people like a problem to manage, because the Karai treat everyone like meat. And I'm tired of living in a galaxy where practical means cruel. Sari's hand hovered near his chest, close enough he could feel the faint field around her skin. If you do this, she said, voice tight, you will burn. Elias nodded. Maybe, but the Karai will burn more. Sari's jaw clenched. For the first time she looked afraid. House Vey does not owe you, she whispered. Elias looked at her. I'm not asking for debt. A distant boom shook the corridor. The Karai were getting closer. Sari inhaled slowly as if drawing strength from the ruined air. Then she moved. In one fluid motion, she reached up and tapped 2 fingers against the side of Elias' helmet near his ear. The HUD flickered, and suddenly his comms lit with a new signal, encrypted, unfamiliar. What did you? A channel, Sari said. My channel. If you survive, you will speak to me again. Elias blinked, surprised. That's your idea of encouragement, Sari's eyes flashed. It is my idea of certainty. Then she turned and vanished down the corridor toward the sealed doors, moving like a shadow given purpose. Elias stared after her for half a heartbeat, and then the Karai rounded the far junction, a wall of armored bodies and hungry eyes. Elias raised his rifle and smiled. Come on, he murmured. Let's shock the universe. He fired. The first wave fell hard, but Karai didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like a storm. They poured forward, climbing over their dead, snarling, throwing themselves at cover like their own lives meant nothing. Elias shot until his rifle's charge whined empty. Then he threw it aside and drew his combat knife. He moved like a machine built for survival. Every sense fed the next decision. Every heartbeat felt like a drumbeat in his bones, steady, inexorable. He took hits, cuts. A blade glanced off his shoulder and should have severed muscle. Instead, the wound knit as fast as it opened, pain blooming and then dissolving into heat. He realized with a sick twist of awe that his body was learning the battlefield, not just healing, adapting. Karai tried to overwhelm him. His reflexes sharpened. They aimed for gaps in his armor. His skin thickened, subtle but real, a dense layer beneath the surface that blunted impact. They lunged at his throat. His neck muscles tightened preemptively, turning a killing strike into a bruise. Elias had seen alien tech. He'd seen biotech. He'd seen coalition medbays regrow organs in vats. He'd never seen anything like this. He wasn't just surviving. He was becoming something the galaxy had no file for. He shoved a Karai back, slammed it into the wall, and heard the bulkhead dent. His strength startled him so much he almost hesitated, almost. He forced the hesitation down. Later, he told himself, process later. Now was for the people behind the sealed doors. Now was for the junction. Elias backed toward a maintenance panel he'd noticed earlier, the one his new senses had marked as a power junction. He ripped it open with a grunt that felt too easy. Wires and conduits glowed faintly inside. His HUD flashed warnings as his suit tried to interpret what he was doing. Elias didn't need the suit, he could feel the flow. He jammed his knife into a manual override slot and twisted. The panel sparked, biting his glove. The lights overhead flickered, then they flared, not red, white, bright, brutal. Emergency UV arrays, meant for sterilization, activated in a cascading wave, flooding the corridor with a spectrum that made the air look sharp. The Karai hissed and recoiled, not because it hurt them, but because it made them visible. It stripped their shadows away. And then from deeper in the corridor came a sound Elias had never heard from them before: fear. They didn't like fighting in light. They liked corners, chaos, darkness. They liked prey that couldn't see them coming. Elias stepped forward into the blaze like he belonged there. A Karai swung at him desperate. Elias caught the arm, his grip tightened, bones cracked, the raider screamed. Elias leaned in, his voice calm in the roaring lights. "This is the part," he said softly, "where humans stop being your favorite story." He threw the Karai down, the raiders faltered, suddenly uncertain. Elias could smell it, the shift, not in their bodies, in their belief. He had become something outside their expectations. Something that stood in light and didn't die. He saw movement behind them, coalition Marines surging in, drawn by the sudden flare of sterilization arrays and the chaos of a stalled raider push. Their rifles lit the corridor in disciplined bursts. Karai bodies fell, the wave broke. Elias exhaled, shoulders shaking. He didn't realize until that moment how close his body still was to collapse. The night's gift held him up, but it wasn't infinite. His heart hammered not with weakness but with effort, like a reactor running hot. His vision swam. He tasted copper again. He fell to one knee. A Marine's voice crackled through his comms. "Unknown combatant, identify yourself." Elias tried to answer, but the words stuck. He was suddenly aware of how he must look. Blood on his armor, eyes reflecting too much light, posture too still. He was suddenly aware that the coalition, his own side, might not know what to do with him. Then Ceri's encrypted channel blinked. Her voice slid into his ear like a blade sheathed carefully. "Elias Rourke," she whispered, "do not let them chain you." Elias swallowed, forcing his breath to steady. The Marine shouted again, closer now. "Identify." Elias pushed himself upright with a slow, deliberate motion, letting the UV light paint him as clearly as it painted the Karai dead. He turned toward the Marines. And he spoke, voice carrying through the corridor and into every recording device and helmet, cam, and station sensor still functioning. "I am human," Elias said. The Marines hesitated. Elias lifted his hands, showing empty palms, no weapon, no threat. Then he added, voice quiet but iron strong, "And I am not dying today." Later, hours later, after the junction was secured and the civilians were evacuated and the station limped toward a repair dock, Elias sat in a med bay that smelled too clean, too bright. Doctors in white coats watched him through reinforced glass. Not because he was violent, because they didn't know what he was. A coalition officer stood with arms folded, eyes sharp. "You engaged in hemal exchange," she said flatly. Elias met her gaze. His eyes, he noticed now, caught the light differently, not glowing. Not monstrous, just sharper. "I drank blood," he agreed. The officer's jaw tightened. "Do you understand the contamination risk?" Elias leaned back on the med table, feeling his body hum under his skin like a second heartbeat. "Do you understand the survival risk of letting me die?" The officer's eyes narrowed. Behind the glass, Ceri stood in shadow, unseen by most. She had insisted on being here, wordless and unwavering, like a witness. Elias glanced at her and felt something tug in his chest. Not romance, not ownership, not hunger, something stranger. Connection. Ceri's blood had changed him, but it hadn't erased him. The officer exhaled, controlled. "The council will want you quarantined." Elias' mouth twitched. "Of course they will. Some will call you a weapon," the officer said. Elias looked at his hands. He could feel the strength in them. He could feel how easily he could break things now if he chose. He looked up again. "At them," he said. "They always fear what they don't control." Ceri's voice touched his ear again, soft as night. "And what will you become, Elias Rourke?" Elias stared at the officer, at the medics, at the cameras, at the galaxy that would soon know his name. He thought of the junction, the sealed doors, the children holding their breath. He thought of Ceri slicing her wrist with steady hands and calling his fear a myth. He thought of the UV light, how it had revealed everything. Elias smiled, tired but unbroken. "I'll become," he said, "the thing that stands in the light." And somewhere far beyond the station, across the coalition networks, recordings began to spread. Analysts replayed the moment a dying human rose with alien blood in his veins. Politicians argued. Scientists panicked. Hemovore houses watched with ancient, unreadable eyes. The universe had always liked its categories neat: predator, prey, ally, enemy. Elias Rourke had become a contradiction. And contradictions, the galaxy learned, were the most dangerous kind of hope.